morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. Well, welcome to the second annual Girls Education Conference, Progress, Power, and Possibilities. Boy, what a difference a year makes. I'm Dory McWhorter. I'm the CEO of the YWCA Metropolitan Chicago, and we are thrilled to have you here today. As I mentioned, this is our second annual Girls Education Conference, and we're so proud to continue the partnership that we have with the African Community Fund for Education. The partnership that has allowed us to bring this conference to you is so important, and we're so grateful for our friend Stanley that you'll hear from in a minute, but wanted to absolutely welcome you and thank you for being so flexible with us as we had to pivot, which is the word of the decade, to a virtual platform. So thank you for spending time with us today. So for those of you who are not familiar with the YWCA Metropolitan Chicago, and it's so bad, I actually just don't remember if I said my name. I'm Dory McWhorter, but of course, if I didn't say it, you can read it there. So thank you. And I am so honored to be the CEO of the YWCA Metropolitan Chicago. And for those of you who are not familiar with our work, we're one of the oldest and largest human services providers in the Chicago area. Our mission is to eliminate racism, empower women, and promote peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. We are an established national leader in the areas of early childhood education, trauma intervention, family support services, and economic empowerment programming. We are an active member of many national, state, county, and city level coalitions, and actually with our partnership with ACFE, it actually makes us international as well. But we are representing the interest of and advocating for policies that positively affect women, girls, and families. So as we establish the theme this year of progress, power, and possibilities, it's because we thought that it was very important to recognize how far we've come with regards to girls' education, and also how much power we have today to shape the possibilities of the future. I feel enthusiastic being in the company of my dear friend and partner, Stanley, and I'm going to, as long as I've known Stanley, I still need to slow down when I pronounce his last name out of just so much respect and love for Stanley. But Stanley Ndambakua, and forgive me, Stanley, if I still slaughtered it, but you know it's so much love here. You'll meet Stanley shortly, as well as our incredible guest speakers today. And if it's these folks who are shaping the future of education, the world's children are absolutely in good hands. So we'll begin today with an amazing keynote address on the digitalization age. Apparently, I can not only say last names, I can't even say big words. The Digitalization Age by Jaime Casap, education evangelist at Google. Then followed by a presentation from my dear friend Kamika Smith on developing the next generation of girl bosses. Kamika is the founder of the Boss Network and program director for Boss on Campus. Then following Kamika, we'll have an amazing panel with featuring great panelists, Esther Benjamin, who is the CEO and Executive Director of World Education Services, Jill Eve, and forgive me, Jill, if I pronounce your last name wrong as well, Executive Director of Girls on the Run in Chicago, Carla Walker, who's the President of Think Big Strategies, LLC, and Victoria Watkins, who's the Chief of Staff to the Chairman and CEO of Ariel Investments and co-founder and Vice President of Project Style. So I'm definitely looking forward to hearing from these ladies. And then we'll make sure that we just have to say thank you to our amazing partners and acknowledge these sponsors who have really been such supporters of us, not only today, but throughout the year. So the University of Chicago Center for Global Health, we so appreciate your support. And I'd also like to acknowledge the International House at the University of Chicago, who were donating their facilities to host this event prior to us having to move to a virtual format. So thank you. Your partnership is absolutely so important. And then finally, I'd like to acknowledge a few special guests joining us today. So Jacqueline and John Bucksbaum of the Jacqueline and John Bucksbaum Foundation. And Maya Suto Rowing, and forgive me, Maya, if I slaughtered your name as well, but Maya is the former President Barack Obama's sister and consultant for the Obama Foundation. So I just really want to thank you all for being part of this event, and thank you for pivoting with us this year as we bring this to a virtual format. We're so excited about the content today and hope that you will get as much out of it as I know there was so much love putting it together as we bring this to you today. So now, please join me in welcoming my friend Stanley from the African Community Fund for Education, who, of course, Stanley is the president and CEO and looking dapper as ever. Thank you, Stanley.
Yeah, thank you, Dory. Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon for those in Africa. I'm excited this afternoon to be joined by my long-term strategist, Kala Walker, and my sister, Madeline Dambakua. Dory, I'm so grateful for your leadership in spearheading the success of this conference. When I met Dory, I fell in love with Chicago because I learned the story of what it takes to change the world for girls. It needs a leader who is fearless and phenomenal like her, and Dory is a perfect example of what girls could become when they become educated. Thank you for your hard work and for being my backbone. Today, I'm so humbled to share my perspective about the current situation. As the current pandemic continues to tear the world, exposing the brutal inequalities affecting the disadvantaged populations and lowering hopes of low-income communities, the global fight for girls' education and equality is a risk. The pandemic is creating a new world for learners that we have never anticipated. Neither did policymakers, the educators, nor governments. This moment is disrupting the major efforts that we have achieved over the years. Some girls in developing countries like Zimbabwe will not return to school after the crisis, doubling pre-existing dropouts due to pregnancies and financial constraints that were already affecting girls. Globally, 130 million girls are out of school and they have little or no access to online education. So when girls stay at home, they become more vulnerable to the challenges they've been fighting over the years. As an Obama scholar, I was equipped to change the world. This conference, the work we do, the students we assist, and the challenges that the world is facing right now is a clear indication of how much work still needs to be done. In educating girls, and preparing them for future leadership roles, we help to advance the progress, the power, and the possibilities for girls. Conversations like the ones we are having today are the ones that inspire the world and change and bring change globally. Without an education, I would not have escaped poverty. I know how it feels to have the desire to go to school without the means to pay for tuition. When I was born as the only boy in a family of girls, I had the privilege to understand the educational challenges that are faced by girls from disadvantaged families and communities. In learning from my story and the world, I know what an education can do for girls. It gives them hope and it gives them a future. That's why the African Community Fund for Education remains dedicated to empowering girls through education and leadership development. I am grateful to have the privilege to stand in the shoulders of the great leaders who are givers, advisors, and counselors whose counsel makes it possible for us to continue to support girls. My mentors remind me that this work is indeed a collective effort, and your presence today is encouragement for the efforts that we are faced with after this crisis. My mentors remind me, my mentors and our givers are the people who can bring about the change. We are the people that can bring about the change. We are the persona of that change. We are the change, so let's change the world. Before I would welcome Shelley, I would like to play this video so you can have a great idea of the work that we're doing in Zimbabwe. I'll let Christos play that for me.
Ndakangochengeta mwana uyu kusvika ndakasuna ari pano achipereka zvidzidza grade 7 kudaro kuti ndichizondi kuenda mberi kuti paonekwe zvinodiwa zvabva zvatonetsa.
Semunhu akazoona baba mari yachona kuti ndikwanise kuiwana ndakangogara pano pamba sezvizvi zvandikwanisa.
Our education and community programs target orphans and vulnerable children from low-income communities. Our interventions help to create access to education for those children who cannot go to school if no one helps them.
Now I'm at school, but I get Form 3, where I stopped. Just final thanks to Mr. Ndambakua. I would like to be like him, helping children to go to school.
Thanks, Christoph. And now I would like to welcome the YWCA Metropolitan Chicago Chief Reimagination Officer, Shelley Bromberg Lambert. Sorry if I get that wrong, to introduce our keynote speaker. Shelley.
Thank you, Dory and Stanley, and welcome everybody to the second Girls Education Conference. I'm so excited today to introduce you to Kamika Smith. He is the Education Evangelist at Google. I thought I had a great title until I heard his title. In his role at Google, Jamie evangelizes the potential of a digitalization as an enabling capacity in the pursuit of promoting inquiry-based learning models. He collaborates with school systems, educational leaders, and focuses on building innovation into our educational policy and practices. Additionally, he serves as an advisor for dozens of organizations focused on learning, skill development, and the future of work. He is the co-author of Our First Talk About Poverty, and he helped launch the Phoenix Coding Academy, which is a public high school focused on computer science, where he teaches 10th grade communication. He's also a guest lecturer at Arizona State University. In his presentation today, he'll delve into digitalization and how it impacts our lives and the ways in which it will help prepare our students in the future. Welcome, Jamie, and thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm glad you you described what I'm going to be talking about so that I actually know what my focus should be on. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Flagstaff, Arizona. This is a temporary location. My wife and I came up here to escape the 350-degree heat that's in Phoenix. We do this every year. So welcome to Arizona, and we won't get into what's going on here. But I want to talk about a couple of different things. I want to give you a little bit about my background and some of the things that I believe, and then I want to talk about digitalization, and then I want to talk about the skills that students need. And then we're going to have time to answer questions at the end of that. So make sure you're jotting down your questions in the Q&A section so that we can go through those and be happy to answer any questions. All right, so my name is Kamika Smith, or Kamika Smith, depending on what language you speak. And I am the Chief Education Evangelist at Google. I've been at Google now for almost 15 years and focused on the education space, focused on things like launching Google Apps for Education into the university space, and then in K-12, launching Chromebooks into education, launching our transformation center. So I work across all the different teams. As mentioned in the introduction, I also started a school in Phoenix called the Phoenix Coding Academy. I do a lot of consulting work on my own, working with universities and organizations focused on education and what we can do with digitalization. So all this involvement in education is because I'm passionate about education, because I believe that education disrupts poverty. I actually now believe that education also disrupts hate, racism, ignorance, and all the other issues that we're dealing with. So I think more than ever, we need to spend time really thinking about what education looks like and how do we shape it for the future that we face. Now, this passion comes from my personal experience because education disrupted poverty for me. Like Stanley, I am a he's not a first generation American. I grew up poor. I'm a first generation American, grew up in Hell's Kitchen, New York, old school Hell's Kitchen from the 70s and 80s when it wasn't a great place to be. And I grew up with a single mother. I grew up on welfare and food stamps. I grew up with all the things that lots of our students face on a daily basis. And education was the way I got out, right? So it was either to play sports or get my education. And I was a good basketball player, captain of my high school basketball team, but never good enough to play in the NBA. So I focused on getting my college degree, getting my master's degree. And here I am talking to you only because of hard work and education, right? That's the silver bullet that we often talk about. And so we should probably take it very seriously when we think about what we can do with education. Now, education is going through a transformational change, but you also have to consider the fact that education that we provide for our students isn't just important to the students that you face in your programs and in your daily lives. That education for students goes on for generations and generations. I have I know this because I have my own kids now, right? I have a 27-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 5-year-old. Two of them are girls. The bookends are girls. And yeah, they're all different ages. So I have like my own little marketing group. And I thought I was slick by just having one at a time. And they ended up all living in the house at the same time for the last 5 months. And I'm going insane. But that is a personal problem. Anyway, that's the importance of education. And so we should probably take it seriously because it goes on for generations and generations. Now, when it comes to where we are today, we are now living in a digitalized world, right? I often talk at events or I used to talk at events. I'm supposed to be in Chicago with you today. And I ask people to raise their hand if they haven't used technology today. And no one ever raises their hand because we use technology in everything that we do. And digitalization is the core to everything, right? Now I'm talking about computer science, artificial intelligence, machine learning, AR, VR, automation, robotics, the whole package of digitalization. And we have to understand that the language for digitalization is computer science. And that computer science is how all these things happen. Now, I'm not saying everyone needs to go become a computer scientist, even though the world needs lots of computer scientists. What I'm saying is that we need to understand computer science. We need to understand the basics of it, how it works, what you do with it, how do you create solutions using it? Because everything is going to have a digitalized angle to it, no matter what it is that you do, no matter what problem you're trying to solve. And having an understanding of it is critical. Here's an example. I'm sitting here right now in downtown Flagstaff. And imagine the problem that I'm trying to solve is to get to the Flagstaff airport. That's the problem that's been assigned to me that I'm trying to solve with a team. Now, imagine I don't know that cars exist. What kinds of solutions would I come up with? Maybe I would come up with a great solution about how to walk there and what roads I can take and how much shade I will have. I'll come up with a great mathematical formula that says, if your flight's at 10 p.m., you need to leave at 8:30 and this is how you get there. And I would have a great solution. But if I don't know that cars exist, am I coming up with the best solution? And that's where we are with computer science. We need to understand computational thinking. We need to understand design principles. We need to understand engineering. We need to understand how this stuff works so that we can create solutions, because everything from here on end is going to have a digitalized angle. And the reason I know that is because it's been true forever, right? The first time I went to work 25 years ago, there was a digitalized tool sitting on my desk. This automation tool, if you will, called a dummy terminal that did this magical thing called send an email. And if I wanted to send you a message back then, 25 years ago, I'd sit at my terminal, type up the message, and it would magically get to you through email. Now, if you think about it, if I wanted to do the same thing 10 years before that, I would actually have to write it all out on a piece of paper, hand it to a typing pool, a group of people that would sit in a circle and type up papers. And eventually somebody would get to it and they'd hand it back to me and I'd make some edits, and then we'd go back and forth for a while until it was ready to send out. And then we would put it in an envelope and mail it to you. That 2-week process had now been shut down to a couple of seconds, right? That automation, robotics, this stuff has been happening for a long time. It's just happening faster and faster and faster. And this was before the pandemic. Put yourself in the position of a business owner. Put yourself in a position of a CEO of a large public company. Put yourself in a position of a COO of a large company or any company, and ask yourself, through this pandemic, what is your biggest risk to your business? What was the biggest risk to your business and still is going through this pandemic? And if you're honest in your evaluation, you'll say it's people, human resources, that processes were shut down because you couldn't get people to do that process work. And so if you're a business owner, what you should be planning right now is how to minimize human beings in your process work as much as possible. And so this has already been happening for a while. For example, think about a grocery store. You go into a grocery store, you have all these people doing process work, right? They're scanning your cans and putting them in a bag for you. Now you're seeing a growth in self-service, and eventually you're gonna see yourself just being able to walk into a store, take what you need, and then walk out of the store because the store checks you in, like Amazon's doing in Seattle. So these folks that we call today essential workers, at the same time that we're calling them essential workers, they're being replaced by digitalization. That role, that's an important part of this. That role is being displaced, right? And so this is happening in real time right now. In Singapore, for example, a movie theater has eliminated people from the process of the movie theater. They now do automatic ticketing. They do an automatic self-service snack system. Just in the last 5 months, they've been able to transform into this. In South Korea, they're eliminating supermarket workers because they don't want that human angle either, whether it's contact or the fact that if you can't predict how many people you have in your work process at any given time, your business falls apart. So I believe, this is just my personal theory, that you're gonna see a hockey stick growth when it comes to automation, robotics, digitalization, machine learning, all these tools that help minimize the human resource part of work. And so that means we need to think about what that means for our students in the future. But before I get to the skills that I believe they need, I need you to think about the fact that given all this, and as much as you know digitalization, and as much as you see it impacting the world and jobs, and as much as you see an impact in education, you have to understand that we are at the very, 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 very beginning of this. This is all brand new. It's been happening gradually for a long time, but it's still brand new. For example, if you think about the fact that your phone, this device that you can't live without, the device that when you actually get to leave home, if you forget it, you will go back and pick it up because you need it, right? You feel like you need it. This device is 11 years old. In 1995, there was 1% of the world online, 1%. Today, you would think it's 99%, but it's not. It's roughly 50%. And I've been to a lot of these countries that say they have internet access and they don't. 50% of the world. So we're at the very beginning. Here's another example how I know we're at the beginning of this. Google just had a breakthrough in quantum computing. And I'm not going to get into what quantum computing is, but I'll give you an example of the breakthrough. I'll explain what the breakthrough is. And the breakthrough is this. If you take an equation, a calculation, and you feed it to a supercomputer, the world's most powerful supercomputer, it will take that supercomputer 10,000 years to equate that, to complete that equation, right? One of those crazy mathematical formulas that just keeps spinning until you get to a conclusion. Supercomputer, 10,000 years. The breakthrough that Google had was that we can now do that equation in 300 seconds. 10,000 years, 300 seconds. What do you think is going to happen between these 2 points? What kinds of innovations, what kinds of things are we going to be able to create in the next 20, 30 years, given that? That's where we are today. We're not slowing down in any way. So given that we have digitalization and it's continuously growing, and we're at the point now where it's become part of everything that we do and every solution and everything that is involved in the world, we have to ask ourselves, what are we teaching our students? And we have to recognize that if we're teaching them stuff that machines do, then we're probably preparing them for failure. If this is the simple test that I use, if a machine can do it better, and by machine, I mean this whole digitalization world that I'm talking about, then I'm not going to worry about my kids learning that stuff. What I want them to focus on instead, what I think about every single day when I think about my 5-year-old, when I see her in the morning, I want her to learn these skills: problem solving, collaboration, critical thinking, the ability to learn, and creativity. Those are the things that I want her to know how to do. I don't care what the content is. I don't care what the subject is. As long as she's learning how to do those skills, because those skills are going to complement anything that happens in digitalization. And I'll give you a couple of examples, but I want to make sure I'm clear with these skills, because we almost have to shout this. We've been talking about these skills forever. We've been talking about these skills for so long, we call them 21st century skills. We're 20 years into the 21st century, and we're still talking about 21st century skills. And I think we say 21st century skills because it feels like it's something in the future, right? Oh, you need to help build these 21st century skills for the future. So I don't have to worry about it right now. It's way down there. We're 20 years in. These are essential skills. These are critical skills. If you want to trigger me, and it doesn't take a lot to trigger me, but if you want to trigger me, call them soft skills. They're not soft skills. They're essential. They're number one. Content, subjects is 2. Those skills are the most critical things inside, of course, of the basic things that students need to know around mathematics and how mathematics works, and language and how to use language, and reading and the content that you have to put in your head so that you don't repeat yourself or repeat history. That stuff, along with those skills that our students need, are essential. And math, for example, we've been teaching poorly since the beginning. We've never talked to students about math in the way I believe we should be talking about them. And this is a real life experimental example, because this is what I'm doing with my 5-year-old daughter. I talk to her about math, not as some concept or something that's out there that you have to learn. I've been talking about math with her since she was 2 years old, about how it is life, that math is in everything, that math is in everything natural and everything man-made. And that if you can figure out those mathematical problems or mathematical perspectives and whatever it is that you're looking at, then you're inside the matrix. You can figure things out. So that math concept isn't something that we should be teaching as a separate thing. It should be ingrained into everything, including these skills that we're talking about. But I want to focus, I'm not going to talk about all the skills, but I want to focus on a couple of them, because if you would ask me 5 months ago, out of all these skills, which one should we start with? What's the most important one? I would have said, no, you need to teach all of them at the same time. They're all critical. And that's true for the most part, but I would say that the one that we should be focusing on first, given the situation that we're facing, is the ability to learn. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying the ability to take a test or the ability to outline a textbook or the ability to learn in the traditional sense of folding up your hands and sitting on your desk and listening for 8 hours. That's not what I mean by the ability to learn. I mean the ability to have self-awareness, to know that you don't know how to do something, understand where to go learn how to do it, and then be able to determine whether you've learned it or not, all inside the same ecosystem that is you. This idea that you don't know how to do something changes the language, changes the mindset, right? So I get to, when I talk to adults all the time, adults, not even students, adults will say to me, I'm not very creative. I'm not good at finance. I'm terrible at math. And my response back to them, and this is why I don't have a lot of friends, my response back to them is, no, you've chosen not to be creative. You have chosen not to be good at math, and you've chosen not to be good at finance, because everything that you need to learn those things is out there. You are choosing not to learn those things. And it's an important distinction to understand that these are choices that we make. And so we can change the mindset from a student saying, I'm not good at math, to I need to learn these concepts. I'm not very creative, to I'm learning how to be creative. It's these little, words matter, concepts matter, mindset matters more than anything. And that's what we can do with this idea of the ability to work. It's a self-assessment, it's a self-awareness. I don't know how to do something, where can I learn how to do it? A year ago, I launched my YouTube channel, and I knew nothing about videography. I knew nothing about editing video, zero. Like I'm a photographer. I've been a photographer my whole life. And I've had good cameras, but I didn't even know my camera had a record button on it. That's where I'm starting with videography and editing and YouTube and starting this channel. Zero. My oldest daughter, my 27-year-old, actually is a video producer. She actually is an editor. She has a degree in film. She actually works in the business. She works at CNN. She makes fake news, and she does it really well. So I went to her a year ago and I said, listen, I am starting this YouTube channel. Where do I start? This self-awareness. I don't know how to do this. Not, I don't know how to do it. I need to learn how to do this. And I asked her, where do I start? Well, after she stopped laughing for like 10, 20 minutes when I told her I was starting a YouTube channel, she said, start here. Shoot in 1080. You don't need to shoot in 4K. Shoot at 24 frames per second because it gives you the most natural look. Try to keep your eyes, you got to make sure you double your frame rate, keep that around 50, but if you want to slow things down, you're going to need more frames, so you want to extend that. So you want to probably shoot at 120 and double your frame rate to 240, and you want to try to keep your ISO at 100 because that's going to lower the noise that you see on film. And if you go outside to do any filming, that's just going to blow out your exposure. So instead of increasing your shutter speed, what you want to do is get a variable ND filter so you can control the amount of light that comes in by a couple of stops. And I said, oh, thank you, cool, that's amazing. Okay, so here's my second question. What the hell do any of those words mean? That's where I started. And today, I can have the best discussions about whether 10-bit internal recording is better than 12-bit external recording. I can create color profiles for different film types. All this because I'm learning how to do it. And I'm not done, right? If you go to my YouTube channel and subscribe to everyone should subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's just my name on YouTube. Like right now, you'll see the first couple of videos look like hostage videos compared to the last couple of videos that I've done. I can see the progress. I can assess the progress. Starting with that idea of teaching our students the ability to learn so that they can learn on their own for the rest of their lives because they're gonna need to learn faster and faster is absolutely essential. So that's one of the skills. The second one that I wanna focus on is this idea of problem solving. I think that we ask students the wrong question. We ask students, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? That's the wrong question. It's a question that used to make sense when I was a kid. It was a fair question when jobs were stable. It was a fair question when jobs didn't change that much. That doesn't exist anymore. That's not the world we live in. Jobs are constantly shifting and changing. You got to think of it this way. I'm working for a company that didn't exist when I graduated from graduate school. Jobs are changing and moving and shifting at a level that we've never seen before, and that was before the pandemic. So the question that we should be asking students instead is, what problem do you want to solve? What's the problem that spins in your head? Now, it could be a social problem, and God knows we got lots of those, or it could be any problem. It could be how to make better lights, better cameras, better microphones. It could be making cars go faster. If you watch Shark Tank, every person who's walking into that room is solving a problem. Most of the time, they're solving a problem that you didn't even know you had. That concept of problem solving is what we should be focusing on. That's part one. And then the second question that we should be asking students is, how do you want to solve it? How do you want to take your gifts, your talents, your experiences to solve that problem? And that's an important question, because there's millions of ways to solve a problem. And your angle on it, your perspective, your point of view is essential. For example, let's say the problem that I wanted to solve is climate change, just making that up. Climate change, I've been passionate about climate change my whole youth. That's what I want to solve. Well, if you say that to an adult might say to you, oh, you should be a scientist. You should be a researcher. You should study STEM. You should get a degree in global sustainable development. Sure, there's lots of ways to solve the problem that way. But what if that's not what you're good at? What if that's not what your passion is? What if you are a talented photographer? Like, you've been taking pictures since you were 5 years old and shooting videos since you were 5 years old, like my daughter has been. What if you are an amazing storyteller? What if you're an amazing educator and just are brilliant in front of kids and students, like my 19-year-old is? Well, the way you can solve climate change is by going out and documenting climate change, by creating educational programs about climate change, about creating real life experience about climate change, about creating climate change policies around what's happening in poor communities. There's a million ways to solve a problem. That having that self-awareness of what your talents are, what your gifts are, what your passions are, to solve that problem is essential. And then the third question that we should be asking ourselves, and this ties back into the ability to learn, is, what do you need to know to solve that problem? What are the knowledge, the skills, and the abilities you need to have to solve that problem in both areas, right? What are your knowledge, skills, and abilities that you need to have in climate change? And maybe you do need to get a degree in global sustainable development. What are the skills and the abilities that you need to develop as a photographer or as an educator to be able to tackle that problem? Where can you start getting those knowledge, skills, and abilities? How do you start developing them? And here's the thing that we often don't talk about, because I think we take it for granted. We have the world at our fingertips. We literally have all the world's information at our fingertips. There is absolutely nothing that can't be learned today. And that's the opportunity. What classes can you be taking online, offline? What classes could you be taking at major universities across the world? Who's solving this problem today? What do they know? How do they learn it? Reach out to them on LinkedIn. What newsletters, what blogs, what research is out there? You can spend all day learning, go to bed, wake up the next morning with an empty head, and then learn all over again. And so we have to think about those skills. And I can go on about collaboration, and I can go on about critical thinking. Those are the most essential ones that we can focus on with our students, because this digitalized world isn't going to stop. These human skills that we need across the board, no matter what the solutions, no matter what the problems are absolutely essential. And with that, I will pause and answer questions that you guys might have.
Great, thanks, Jamie. I have a question for you. I love that you said that education disrupts poverty, racism, and hate. What role and how can we use it in a positive role, digitalization, around making sure that it's not used in a negative way?
So it's, first, let's accept the fact that everything, there's nothing that can't be used in a positive way and a negative way? Nothing. A camera could be used to record something bad that's happening, that you bring awareness to the world. A camera could be used to put in somebody's window and record their privacy. Medicine is used for good, and medicine could become addicted to. The same is true with technology. It isn't the thing, it's the culture, it's the guiding principles, it's the morality, it's the things that we could be teaching our students to how to use those tools for good that we need to focus on, because anything can be used for good or bad. It's a question of how do we use what's good and bad. But I will say this, if all we do is take this technology and put it on top of our current models and systems, then all we're doing is making the old system maybe a little bit faster. What we need to do, and this kind of gets to your point, is think about what the best ideas, this is where we would start. What are the best ideas we have in education? What's the best research that we have about learning, about what motivates students? What are the best ideas that we have about inquiry-based learning or project-based learning models? And then ask ourselves, because now we know more about digitalization, how do we use these tools to, the way you said it's for good, how do we use these tools to bring these ideas to life? And if we do that, then we'll start focusing on the good side of technology.
Great. I have several questions around the theme about, can we learn anything? And where do we begin in our learning journey?
Yeah, again, I think it's a mindset. So it's this construct, right? So I tweeted out on my Twitter account a couple of days ago, I'm seeing some things from education folks about the COVID slide and how students are behind. And I'm like, behind in what? Behind in standardized testing? Behind in what are they behind in? Because we build these artificial constructs of what students are supposed to know by X, right? So learning shouldn't have time, right? So my point is that take a concept like fractions. You might get fractions in an hour. I might get fractions in 10 years. It doesn't matter how long it takes me, because the beauty is, again, I said this earlier, that you can't fill up the brain, right? If you learn for 15 hours, and I've done this through just my video production work, if you learn for 15 hours and you go to bed and you wake up the next morning, you got a whole other 15 hours to learn, right? Like, you can learn anything all day. And so we have to understand that learning stuff and learning how to do things isn't the same as things that we can or can't do in the physical learn, right? So in the physical world, I could learn how to dunk a basketball. But I'm 52 years old. I haven't dunked a basketball in like 60 years, right? Like, this idea that I can learn how to dunk a basketball and then go out and dunk it is never gonna work. The things that are mental, back to this idea of problem solving and critical thinking, these human skills, anyone can learn these skills.
Great. So we have a question here from Cheryl. She has 2 kids in high school, and this is not how they learn in school, how you've described. Do you see this shift happening in public education, or is this something that parents need to really build into their kids?
That's a great question, because I hope so. I think it is a combination of things. It is a combination of parents and what parents do. But look, I didn't grow up with parents, right? I grew up with a single mother, and I grew up with, and we won't get into the ideas or into those issues, but I don't create solutions that rely on parents, just my personal experience. And so a lot of this has to happen in schools as far as I'm concerned. And what we need to do is understand that it's up to us to change these models, and we know what works. That's the part that is sad to me, is that we know what good learning looks like. We watched models of it. We know schools across the world. I've been to these schools that do it correctly. We're choosing not to do it. And so my part in all of this is to make people uncomfortable to get to the point where they choose to do it correctly.
Great. I have another question here. Can you share your perspective on students learning to become Renaissance people? I think of how people in the past did multiple jobs in their lifetime. What is old and what is new?
Yeah, no, look, I think that the two concepts for me is there's a great book called Range by my friend David Epstein that you should read. Great book. And he talks about exactly that. He talks about the greatest accomplishments by the greatest people, and he talks about their learning path. And, you know, Michelangelo, and I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but Michelangelo didn't start working until he was like 42, right? Like these concepts of this Renaissance working thing. I've been accused of it myself, right? Go to my Instagram account. I'm an astrophotographer, right? I'm a videographer. I'm a YouTuber. I'm a consultant. I'm a speaker. I think that I used to be a basketball player. I'm not a basketball player anymore. But yes, pick up something you're interested in and learn. And here's the great thing about focusing on a passion, focusing on a problem that you're interested in solving. It's different than what the advice is that most people give, which is find something that you love to do and then go find a way to make money doing it. And that could be decent advice, but I like sitting on the couch and watching Game of Thrones and eating Ben and Jerry's. There's not a lot of jobs for that. There's a couple, but not a lot of jobs. And here's the thing about a problem or a passion is that most of the time it's a horrible experience, right? Like my problem is to fix education. There's nothing I love about that, right? But the passion drives me to try to fix it, to try to do that, to work with people to do that through some hard times most of the time. So if you focus on a problem that you're trying to solve, then none of it becomes work. It doesn't work anymore. And the last thing I'll say about that kind of concept is this, and this is kind of a new theme for me since the pandemic that I've been talking more about and trying to get more thinking and vocalization around this, is that I'm starting not to even like the concept of college and career ready. Why are we shooting so low? Why are we shooting to get a job, right? Like, let's shoot higher than that. Let's help our students develop the skills that they need for life, period. And if they get a job, that's the backfall, because I know this generation, I know it well, and this generation is full of passion, full of problems that they want to solve. And what we're doing is missing an opportunity to give them the tools and the techniques to solve those problems as early as an age as they want to. They don't have to wait till they're 25.
Great, thank you. I love that about dropping college readiness and really just preparing people for life and an enriched life and
Right.
really tapping into their purposes. I love that. I have a question here. Any ideas or best practices that you've seen about really reducing the digital gap that we see in developing communities and development across the world?
Yeah, again, those are great questions, because I think if I focus on anything over the last 15 years, has been on the equity issue. And I would say that those of us who have been the advocates for equity in education, not equality, equity, I mean, that's a whole other problem, but just the idea of needing a surge of services and programs and things in communities that need it the most. And by the way, I don't like saying low income communities, because, you know, my daughter lives in New York City, has a full-time job, and she's low income. My ass grew up poor. So in communities of poverty, what do we need to do? We need a surge of services. We need a surge of programs so that we can get the playing field up to a point where we can actually start talking about equality and teaching content, right? So those of us who have been in that fight for a very long time have been most of the time facing resistance. And I think that given what we're facing today with the pandemic and the social justice issues, I think there's an awakening and understanding that, yeah, you know what, things aren't equitable. And I'm interested to taking advantage of this opportunity that we have with a spotlight on equity and what the pandemic did to highlight what the discrepancies are between the haves and the have-nots. And so I'm excited about this opportunity.
Great. And then I have one final question. And when we talk about, this comes from Diane, and she talks about, when you talk about the skills that you think are essential for success. And I'm a kindred spirit in your one around learning, having that as a core value that's propelled me through life. Diane's question for you is, do you think that these principal elements are something that need to be in the workplace? Can they be learned? How does the employers help foster these skill developments in the workplace?
Yeah, so I think in a workplace, you have, I mean, if you go look at any organization's training curriculum, right? Like, or what they offer their employees, you'll see nothing but these skills: how to be a better communicator, problem solving skills, how to do better strategy work, right? Like that's all this is. I mean, Google hires for 4 things, right? We're looking for 4 things when we hire people. General cognitive ability. Are you smart? Right? And smart can be defined in lots of different ways. Role-related knowledge. Do you know stuff about the thing that you're applying for, right? So if you want to be an engineer, you probably should know how to code. If you want to work in HR, you should probably know stuff about HR. The third is what we call leadership. And by leadership, we don't mean leadership. I think we mean collaboration. And what that means is, because leadership isn't, hey, can you tell people what to do and they just follow you out of fear? That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for collaboration. Can you influence? Can you motivate? Can you lead? Can you take a step back and let someone else lead? And then the last thing we're looking for is Googliness, right? Which is really a corporate word for culture fit. Do you fit here? Can you get along with others? And so when you look at these skills, right? Critical thinking falls within role-related knowledge. Problem solving falls within being smart, right? So collaboration falls within, can you work well with others? All these skills fit into that framework of what organizations look for from students. And so I think that that's the thing. But more importantly, what we need to consider as adults is an understanding of this next generation. And we need to understand that 70%, and again, this is, I can't wait to see the data after the pandemic. 70% of this generation, Generation Z, those are students that are in schools now, don't want to work for you at all. They want to do their own thing. They want to solve problems. They're not interested in the rat game. They're not interested in the, how do I get from level 1 to level 2 to level 3? What are the carrots? What are the sticks? They're problem solvers. And so how do we help them build those skills?
Great. I said that was the last question, but I do have one more that came across that I think everybody would love to hear about. What would be, and who are some of the transformational thought partners that you see that really have helped you to think about all of this in different perspective, and how can, who should we look to? As in
education, you mean?
Yes, in education.
Yeah, so if you go to my Twitter account, it's just at JCASAP, you'll see a thread out there on, I put out there you should be reading these books on equity. So there, you know, Chris Emden at Columbia, and then people would respond with other books and other people that are leaders in the space. Chris Lehman, who is the principal at the Science Leadership Academy, a school that's focused on inquiry-based learning. I think that, you know, if you actually start go to people's Twitter's accounts that you respect, that you see as thought leaders or transformational people, and see who they follow, right? See who they retweet, see who they go after, and then you can start building your kind of network of people that you think are interesting in this space.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jamie. We so appreciate you joining us this morning and sharing your perspective about how we really revolutionize the way education is being done. And I think we definitely saw in the pandemic, it was a great opportunity to really stop looking at education the way it's always been and really begin to reinvent. So thank you for joining us this morning.
Sure, thanks for having me. Sorry I couldn't be in Chicago. I was actually looking forward to being there. One of my, like Stanley, one of my favorite cities, and maybe I will get there at some point in the future.
Well, we'd love to host you when you get back this way.
All right, sounds good. Thanks.
Well, welcome back, everybody. We're glad to have our next speaker join us. Kamika Smith is the founder of the Boss Network. It's a community of professional and entrepreneurial women who support each other through conversations, online engagement, and event-based networking. She engages them in conversations to help support the work that they're doing. She is also the program director of Boss on Campus, an empowerment program and media resource for college-age women 18 through 24. She has her master's degree in education and has developed student academic programs for more than 10 years before she started the Boss Network in 2009. Through her leadership of the Boss Network, it has become one of the fastest growing women's business communities and a one-stop shop for career and entrepreneurial-minded women. Kamika is also the author of a book, 7 Steps to Growing Your Professional Network, a guide for college graduates and professionals in a tough economy. In her presentation today, Kamika will discuss the challenges that young girls face in their daily lives, building positive qualities that include confidence, kindness, leadership, and defining what it means to live a purpose-driven life. So welcome to the Girls Education Conference, Kamika. We're so excited to have you here today, and we'd love to hear more about the Boss Network and what you're doing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Shelley. Thank you guys for having me. I'm really excited about this Girls Conference today. My first love is education. I started off my career in education, so I'll go through that because I think that that's important to talk about my journey so that you guys can see how I ended up where I am today as an entrepreneur and a empowerer of girls and women. And so raised here in Chicago, born on the west side of Chicago, and I spent my early childhood on the west side. I ended up in high school on the north side of Chicago in Rogers Park, just because my mom wanted me to have, a better opportunity to education. And of course, some of the schools in the inner city neighborhood where I grew up, they didn't have a lot of the programs that she wanted to see for me, like Upward Bound and some other supportive programs. And so she sent me to Rogers Park to go to high school, which was a great experience because it allowed me to go from a all-Black grammar school to a very, very diverse high school with more than 30 different nationalities, in which, actually broadened my horizons as far as what I wanted to accomplish as a young woman, but then also being able to engage different groups of people. And so I graduated and I went to Northern Illinois University, and I received my undergrad degree in sociology and psychology, and pursued a master's degree in counseling and higher education. I knew that education was something that was really important to me. My initial degree was to be in law, and I realized very soon that that was just not the life that I wanted. After working for a couple of programs in graduate school that helped students on campus, particularly minority students, I knew that education was where I was meant to be. And so I got my master's degree in higher ed and counseling, and I went on to work for Chicago State University here, and then also University of Illinois at Chicago. Yes, a Husky for sure. And I definitely enjoyed, all of my work in higher education, working with students. And I think maybe around, oh God, I can't remember the year, but Chicago Public Schools had developed a post-secondary ed department. At the time, our graduation rate was about 54%. So that's, almost half of our students were not graduating from high school. And so they really wanted to create this department to help students have options. And so whether that was, going into a trade school, a 2-year college, or 4-year college, giving our students in Chicago an opportunity to have access to education beyond just high school. And so I was recruited from UIC to be one of the directors of a program called AVID. And so my charge was as district tutor manager and a recruiter. And so I trained, oh my goodness, several hundred college students to be tutors in about, I think, 64 high schools in Chicago. So I had a very, very busy career traveling from different high schools, recruiting from different local colleges here in Chicago, and training some of the most amazing young people to invest in other young people. And so that's really how my career got started. And, one thing I will say is, being in education at the higher ed level and also at the secondary level, it really allowed me to pursue my passion to help inner city students. Coming from Chicago and being raised in an inner city neighborhood, I knew that I wanted to work with students that looked just like me and give them the opportunity to see that there was so much more opportunity outside of what they might see in their particular neighborhood. So exposure for me was everything. My mom taking that chance and sending us to high school, 2 trains, 2 buses every single day, getting up in the morning, going to school. It allowed me to, go through downtown Chicago and see people walking with their briefcases and, going to work downtown. And it just really opened up my mind to so many things. And then being in high school, having access to so many great programs and career development opportunities, and then also amazing teachers and counselors that really invested in us. That's what I wanted to give back to the young people in my particular neighborhood. So working with Chicago Public Schools was an amazing opportunity. Our great director at the time, who was my mentor and still is to this day, Greg Darniter, who was over the post-secondary ed department, he actually took a position with Artie Duncan in Washington, D.C. with Barack Obama. And so when he took that position, a lot of things, of course, changed. When leadership changes, things change, right? And so at that point in time, I knew that I wanted to move to a different role in Chicago Public Schools. And so I made a commitment to actually go into a high school and work directly with students one-on-one, because that was truly my passion. And so in 2005, I took a position at Michelle Clark High School on the west side of Chicago, which was literally probably about 2 blocks from where I grew up. So I knew a lot of the kids, I know a lot of the parents. My brother actually went to school there, and it was very empowering to walk into that school every single day and see kids that looked just like me, that grew up in the same circumstances as me, and I could empower them. So my charge was as a program director for a program called Freshmen on Track. And so I was charged with actually helping freshmen stay on track during their freshman year, because we saw that there was a correlation between students being on track in their freshman year with actually them graduating from high school. And so I was able to take a lot of my talents and skills into that high school. I actually created a program which kind of started my entrepreneurial endeavors, called the Student Performance Incentive Program. And as a 25-year-old educator in a high school with students that are 18, I had a lot of energy. I was very committed. I was, very loved, of course, by my students. And so I really wanted to show them that, we cared. I wanted to give them as many opportunities and give them as much exposure outside of the west side of Chicago that they could have. And so with my Student Performance Incentive Program that I created, we were able to incentivize students based on their academic performance, their attendance, and their behavior. And so we use those 3 pillars as a measure to reward students with, all types of things, from field trips to the museum to see the Chicago Bulls, Chicago Bears, concert tickets. I had a great community, a great network already in Chicago as a young, influencer. And so a lot of my friends were doing really great things at that time. I had friends who were in the music industry, and so we were able to bring some really great musicians. I had friends that worked for the radio station, so we were able to bring in great hosts from like WGCI and other radio stations, B96. And we really empower those students to want to be successful. And as you all know, as educators, especially with this generation, I think that they are, can be sometimes a little bit entitled. And so I kind of just switched that thing around, and I said, hey, if you all want to be rewarded, give us something to reward you for. And so that was like the motivator. And so those students really stepped up to the plate, and we were able to increase our freshman on track rate from, at the time, which was about, in our high school, 64% to 88%. So that was a huge jump for us. And so I was actually asked to implement my program in 5 other high schools that was a part of our community with the Freshman on Track program. And so I actually went to other schools like Kenwood and Gage Park and some other high schools in Chicago and implemented our program. And we did some of the same things with students. And it was very successful. And so in 2009, you all probably remember that time, 2008, 2009, our district and our country actually experienced a lot of layoffs. I think that was the first recession that I had experienced as an adult. And I knew that I was going to lose my job. My leader at my high school, my principal, and my vice principal were both being transitioned out, and they were bringing in new leadership. And, I love to talk about leadership because I do believe that great leaders create other great leaders. You know, one of my sayings is a boss is not about how many followers you have, but how many leaders you create. And so I truly believe that. And so when our leadership changed, I knew that, you know, things were going to change for me. And so I started preparing for my exit in Chicago Public Schools. I had already had some entrepreneurial endeavors. I'd actually took, you know, the things that I had did with my student performance incentive program and actually started a event marketing company on my own. And so when I was laid off in 2009, I took that as an opportunity to step out into my entrepreneurial endeavors. And so I just sat down with a few friends of mine who were also, you know, interested in entrepreneurship and just talked about some of the challenges we faced as Black women being entrepreneurs. Just like I was first generation to go to college, I was also going to be first generation as an entrepreneur. So I didn't have a roadmap. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't get a degree in business. And so I was really kind of like feeling my way through that process. And so I knew that some of the same tools I use in my career, I would have to use in entrepreneurship. And that was building an amazing network and great relationships. And so I just started to talk to different entrepreneurs, different women who had been successful, who had started businesses. And from there, it really empowered me to say, you know what? I think this will be really great if I could actually share these resources that I've been able to gather with other women. And so I decided to launch a series of events under my event company called BOSS. And it's actually an acronym. You educators know we love acronyms, right? And so BOSS stands for Bringing Out Successful Sisters. And that particular program was really launched to bring together women of color and also other like-minded women who could share their best practices, their strategies, their tips for success with other women. And so that's exactly what we did. We brought in amazing career women, we brought in entrepreneurial women, and we really talked about some of the challenges we faced. We gave real life strategies and tips and tools to help these women become successful, to the point where my events became so popular that we decided to launch a digital platform. I was very new to social media at the time. Facebook was probably one of the first social media pages that I had. And then so we looked at the Facebook model and said, hey, what if we can create something like Facebook for professional women of color, where they can actually network beyond these events? Because a lot of the women were connecting through our events and they were emailing us and saying, hey, how do we actually join BOSS? How do we stay connected? And so we launched the digital platform, thebossnetwork.org, in the fall of 2009. Yes, Madeline, you guys definitely check out the website. So that is thebossnetwork.org. And so we launched a digital platform as a space for women of color, entrepreneurial women, career business women to actually learn from each other. And so I literally utilized every single person I had in my network to provide content for my platform. So to blog about different issues around career advancement, entrepreneurship, getting funding, mentorship. We had webinars, teleseminars, live events. And as we started to grow, we knew that this was something that was beyond just Chicago. And so we started to implement different groups within our network for women in other cities. Well, it actually kind of naturally happened. It kind of morphed because, of course, social media gives you a national, even global reach. And so we started to have members from Atlanta and New York, Africa, Jamaica, the Bahamas, who were joining us and saying, how do we become a boss, right? And so I took that as a charge to say, okay, even though this is not what I set out to do, I wanted to grow my event company. This is obviously what God has led me to do. As a believer, you know, I believe in your purpose in life. And I believe that we all have a purpose-driven life. And so I knew that that was just naturally, I knew that everything that I had learned in education and in my career had led me to this moment to launch this business to help and empower women of color. And so within a year of being a digital platform online, we were featured in Forbes magazine as one of the top 10 career and entrepreneurial websites for women. And that was a huge accolade because, of course, as a new business owner, communities and digital platforms 10 years ago were not really in existence. And they were definitely not in existence for women of color. So I was one of the first communities for women of color. And so to be on the list with other websites like Oprah Winfrey and Martha Stewart and some other great, just business websites, I was really, really excited about that. And so I really just started to delve into, how do I grow this community? How do I bring resources and opportunities to this community? And as I continue to grow that particular brand, because we are a digital platform, I have so many young people, young women, young girls reaching out to me saying, how do we get support? How do we get mentorship? How can we become a boss? And as an educator, I knew that I could not leave that demographic of people out. And so we initially launched a program called Project Boss. And I knew that as an entrepreneur, bootstrapping it, trying to figure out, how to monetize my business, how to grow, that I could not provide every resource for, the women in my network. So I enlisted a lot of other people to help me provide resources. And so we launched Project Boss as a mentorship match program. I believe in collaboration. And so as educators, that resources sometimes can be very slim. So having opportunities to collaborate with other schools or other teachers or other, community programs to expand on the work that you're doing is so important. And so we actually connected with other mentoring programs around the country, and we just matched those students with those programs that were already in existence, that was already doing great work. And we connected those students and they were doing really well. And so as we continue to grow, me being selfish, I wanted to have that impact with those students once again, right? And so we decided to redevelop that Project Boss program for young people and change it to Boss on Campus. I had gotten asked to speak at a couple of different colleges, some here in Chicago, some across the country, Howard University, Morgan State University, Dillard University. And so as I was going to these different colleges speaking on entrepreneurship, there were so many young women coming up to me saying, how do I become a boss? I love my career, but I think I want to be an entrepreneur. And I said to myself, wow, this would be really awesome if we could actually come into the colleges and teach entrepreneurship and also prepare these students for life after college. Because there were just a lot of things that I felt like as a young person in college that I didn't receive to prepare me for the career world. And so I had this amazing network with over 200,000 women across the country. And I said, I need to enlist these women to help me to empower these young people. And so we launched Boss on Campus as a nonprofit. And so Boss on Campus is actually a nonprofit that works with students between the ages of 18 to 24 on college campuses. And so we actually partner with universities and colleges to teach entrepreneurship and career development to students. And so Howard University has been a partner for 5 years. University of Illinois Chicago has been one of our partners for the last 8 years because we started with them when it was Project Boss. And we also teach a summer leadership camp with some of the students through a Project Chance program at Ywca here in Chicago. And so, and of course we have currently probably about, I think, 15 colleges and universities within our portfolio for Boss on Campus. And just working with those students and working with those young people, I realized that this generation of young people, they are leaders. They want to show up. They want to be successful. They have so much desire and they just need somebody to see that in them and push them. That's what I needed. I was a student who, I think I was particularly very smart. I just really didn't know my potential. I grew up in a single parent household, so work for me was really important to support my mom. So I had a job from literally probably 8th grade up until I graduated high school. And so I didn't really push myself a lot because I was focused on getting, decent grades so that I could go to work and, and manage the two. So I knew that, I had to make sure that those students who, might be average students or might have potential, but nobody sees it, that they don't get left behind. And so that's really what the work that I do with the Boss Network and the work that I do with Boss on Campus is all about. Seeing the potential in people, encouraging them to dream big, and just pushing them to go the extra mile. I'm actually also a coordinator for a program called Dream Big, which is a nonprofit through the Joshua House, through my church. And so, yes, I'm a very busy person, but I am very committed to empowering and working with young people. And so one of the things that I see about a lot of our youth today is, they're faced with a lot of challenges just due to just so much exposure. I think they're probably overly exposed. My niece is actually here. I wanted her to come on, but she's, still resting. But she is 11 years old. And, ever since I started Boss, I have brought her to Boss events. I have, put her underneath my wing. I'm sorry, she's 13. I want to keep her a child. She would, be very upset with me because she loves the fact that she's a teenager now. She's 13, she's not 11. My other niece is 11. So one of the things that I really encourage the young people in my family and also the people that I work with is to dream big. Make sure that you are surrounding yourself around people that can invest in you, invest in your talents and your skills and your potential. And so, one of the things that I do is I kind of sit with students and try to find out, where they are, meet them where they are, what is it that you want to accomplish, and trying to match them with people that can support them along the way. Because of course, I can't do everything, but there's so many great resources out there. And so we try to do our best at providing as many resources as possible. Our leadership camp that we do here in Chicago in the summer with Ywca, we actually bring in different speakers and we have conversations around mental health. A lot of our students right now are struggling with mental health. I think that, I know that Shelley and also, the YWCA's great leader, Dory McWater, who I adore, they are aware that my niece, who was 15 years old, committed suicide about 2 months ago. And that was very challenging for myself. But just thinking about the pressure that our young people are under, especially right now when we have so many things that we're faced with. We're living through 2 pandemics. We have this, COVID-19, and then we have these racial injustices and social economic issues. There's so many things that our kids are faced with. And so we need to really talk to them, kind of see where their head is at, and really try to encourage them to see beyond what's in front of them. And so that is my charge. That is my mission with the Boss Network and also with Boss on Campus. And I, just want to commend and just thank you educators for the work that you do. I was in education for about 15 years, and so I know the challenges that you all face. And so I just want to encourage you, as you're also working with our young people, to take care of yourself as well, right? Making sure that you're doing self-care and things that can empower and encourage and also refill you. And so, I just, my heart is with you all. I'm looking forward to continuing to work with the YWCA. I wanted to have this more as a conversation, as opposed to me just presenting, because I think that's much more powerful. And then I would love to open it up now for Q&A and share any of my strategies or best practices with you all.
So thank you so much, Kamika, for sharing kind of your journey. A question that I'd love to hear from, if you could share with all of our attendees, is you talked about not having a roadmap when you started out as an entrepreneur.
Yes.
And what can you share with those in the audience that are passionate to either foster that spirit in the students they work with, or to really help ignite their own entrepreneurial spirit?
Absolutely. That's a great question, Shelley. I tell people there are so many strategies, right? I was an entrepreneur who was what they call a bootstrap entrepreneur. So I didn't have initial investment or funding for my business. And many of you know, just with even everything that's happening right now around, the PPP loan and trying to get investment, people of color are, I think, maybe 1% of entrepreneurs or founders that actually get investment for their business. So it's really important to create a resource or a network of people that can support you on that journey. And so I have 3 R's is what I call it, Shelley. The first is research. You have to know what you're talking about and what you're doing. Someone said they can't hear me. Can you all hear me now? Can you hear me, Shelley?
Yes, I can.
Okay. And so, the 3 R's. And so the first is research. And so you have to know what you're talking about, right? So you have to know your business. So I believe in excellence. Of course, most of educators, we do. And so one of the things that I made sure that I did, especially because I did not have a background in business, I researched so much about my business. I researched about marketing. I researched about building communities. I researched about, starting a business. And so I did all of my research. And then I also, made sure that I was able to, attend and go to different workshops. And so I know the YWCA offers a lot of great programs around entrepreneurship. the Women's Business Development Center, SCORES. And so these are programs that I actually researched on my own and I took advantage of because I didn't have a lot of money to invest in my business at the time. And so I wanted to make sure I took opportunities and got access to as many resources as possible. So research. Know your competition, know your market, know your target market. When I started Boss, I knew that I wanted to work with women of color. And once I was listed in Forbes magazine, people kept telling me, you should make this network for everybody. Well, when I went online, I saw there were networks for everybody, but there was not a network for Black women. And so I knew that if I was very strategic and focused on a specific target, that I would actually be able to have a better impact. And it actually worked because me targeting Black women made us the #1 digital platform for entrepreneurial women of color. It allowed us to garner so many accolades from Forbes to Inc. to Black Enterprise, work with amazing conferences like Essence Festival, MegaFest, I've spoken all over the country. And so I did my research to know what I was getting into, right? The second is relationships. I cannot. I feel like relationships are the key to success. Shelley, you and I actually met through a good friend of ours, Vince Williams, right? So relationships. Yeah. So, having relationships, letting people know what you do and, and how you serve people. And those people, when something comes up, you will be top of mind. And so doing your diligence to not just build a network, not just build a Rolodex, but build solid relationships with people. It's not always about what's in it for me. Sometimes it has to be, what's in it for the other person. Make sure that you are, So make sure that you are building relationships that are long lasting. Even with my clients, I do, strategy sessions and coaching sessions with my client. I make sure that, when I work with a client, I over deliver with my clients. And so when I'm recruiting for my program, it's word of mouth. I don't even really have to recruit because they're sending me clients. They're sending me people from their network. They enjoy working with me. They, their brands grew, their businesses grew. And so they want to, share that information with other people. And doing that by building relationships is the key to success. From sponsors to partners to clients, it's all about relationships. And then my final R is revenue. Listen, if you have a business and you're not making money, you have a hobby. It is not a business. And I had to learn that very, very early as an entrepreneur that I needed to focus on revenue. And trust me, I think I would say as a Black woman, but Shelley, honestly, I just think as women, period, sometimes we're really afraid to ask for our worth, right? We're not really comfortable with saying, this is what I charge, or, this is, my fee. And so I had to learn that, I can't serve other people if I can't serve myself. If I'm trying to figure out how to pay my bills and I'm trying to figure out how to, continue to grow my business, I have to monetize what I do. And so, once I did that, of course, things change when you go from giving everything away to charging. But I'm a positive person by nature. I see the glass half full. So what it taught me was now I have a quality network. I don't have everybody just coming to me because it's a free service. I have people who really want to invest in what I do and want to work with me because they understand the value of what I do. And beyond that, I know my worth, right? I know my worth. And so I am very confident in my speaking fees. I'm very confident in my client fees. I'm very confident in my sponsorship asks. I know what I'm worth because I know that I put in the work to make it happen. And a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we are not really looking at where that revenue is coming from. And so we don't know how to repeat that revenue. And that's so important because Shelley, you can actually have a business that does really, really well one year. And then the next year, you're like, wow, why am I not making money? Well, if you haven't really sat down and looked at your, books to see where's the money coming in, what programs are actually, bringing in, the most value, and what things are just kind of like taking up my time, you have to really look at that, your losses and your profit and your losses in your business. And so once I, got away from the fear of looking at my revenue and not just saying, well, I'm not making any money, so there's no point. Once I started to really look at it and focus on it, I was able to develop programs. I was able to, make sponsorship asks. I was able to ask for certain things for my speaking engagements. And it allowed me to kind of say, hey, this is what I charge because this is what I've done for other companies, other brands, other clients. And so it's super, super important to make sure that you have your research, relationships, and revenue in order.
I love the 3 R's. And we once had, I was talking with one of our funders, and he, I love the part about have to make the revenue piece, otherwise it's a hobby. And his quote was famous, even in the nonprofit world, was he said, no margin, no mission. So I always took that. It really is important work. One of the questions that came up is they really loved how you talked about the boss creating leaders. And not just being what we traditionally think of as the boss. So when you talk about creating leaders, can you give us some tips and examples of things that you do to create those leaders, or good role models you've seen that as we go out and want to create leaders within the girls and women we work with, how we can go about doing that?
Yes, absolutely, Shelley. There's actually a quote that I really love, and I'm going to try to get it right, but it says, leadership is not about titles and position. It's about influencing other people to be just as great. And so that's what I do within my network. I actually empower the women in my network to be the leaders. And so if you attend a boss webinar, you might not see me. Well, more than likely, you're not going to see me, because we have other women in my network that have an array of different talents and skills, because I believe that we all bring something different to, the world, right, with our gifts. And so even with working with young people and students, you might have a teacher that's really, really good at, helping her students achieve academically. And you might have a teacher that's, really great at, helping students, figure out what their career goals are. And so I think that just as leaders, it's important for us to find out our team's talents, right? What are they good at? And then empower them to do those things. That's when I thrived in my career. I think I have a very entrepreneurial nature. So I just remember early in my career, it was a little challenging for me, because I worked with leaders who were a little more foot on the neck type of leaders, right? It was like, I had to do a job, I had a role, but I couldn't really veer off from that. And so I had all these things bubbling up inside of me that I felt like, because I'm working with these students every single day, that would help them, and I wasn't able to do those things. And so it really not only limited, me as a career professional, but it limited my students with access. And so once I got into a position where I was under leaders who were empowering leaders, who actually pulled out the talents and the gifts of their team, it made me flourish. It really just expounded on all the things that I felt like I could do within my career, and also for the students that I work with. So I do believe that a great leader sees the talent in her team or his team, and they try to empower them to actually display those talents to those that they serve.
Love it. We have a former peer who I think is actually on today, and she talks about possibility partners and unleashing people's purpose and potential. And so I love that about how do we have people to really leverage their strengths and their gifts that they have, and be that empowering leader. So thank you so much for that. We have another question. You talked about, and I think we have, we're kindred spirits in our passion around mental health and how important that is. And especially coming out of the pandemic and really needing to be sensitive for that. And I think that when you think about entrepreneurship, and especially for some of the uphill battles, women particularly who are entrepreneurs might have, what tips, how do you balance the stress and the ups and downs with really good mental health practices to make sure that you are taking care of yourself and doing good self-care?
Absolutely, Shelley. This has been kind of like a mission of mine for like the last 2 years. We celebrated our 10th year anniversary with the Boss Network. And many of you know, as entrepreneurs, most entrepreneurs don't make it past the first 3 years. And so, getting to the 10-year mark for me, it was just, it was such an amazing, feat, but it also came with a lot of pressure. And I didn't realize that it was like 10 years of pressure that was like on my shoulder. And, as much as I was celebrating, I realized that now is the time for me to really evaluate what it is that I'm giving to the world, right? And then making sure that I'm taking care of me, because if I'm not in good health mentally, physically, emotionally, then I can't really serve people in the way that I want to. And so some of the things that I implemented, honestly, I talk about success burnout, right? I think a lot of us experience success burnout, and sometimes we don't even know we're burned out because we live in a society where, you know, I remember when my mom was growing up, they talked about the microwave society. I don't even know what this society is. It's not even microwave anymore. It's so fast. It's like lightning speed, right? So we're moving from one thing to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, never really taking moments to celebrate, you know, our achievements. And so I decided that I was going to slow down in this season, well, probably for the rest of my life, right? You know, if I can. Definitely COVID has kind of forced us to slow down, but prior to COVID, that was my challenge to myself, to really slow down and look at what was in front of me. There is power in the word no. So I had to realize that I am not meant to be everywhere, and I'm not meant to be everything for everybody. And so I had to own that word no. You know, no, it's not a good opportunity for me. Maybe not right now, maybe in the future. And really, you know, and not feel like I have to owe an explanation. No explanation, just no. And so that is very empowering. As women, I think that's empowering for us to be able to say no. But then also making sure that, you know, putting actual strategies in place. And so I have a ritual, and I call it my power hour, Shelley. And so first thing in the morning, you know, I try to wake up before, you know, my emails go off, because people work pretty early. And so, you know, I'm usually up by 6 a.m. And that is literally my time to pray and meditate and, you know, journal and, you know, read some type of devotional, and then listen to some worship music. And sometimes I don't get to do all of those things, but I make sure that I do at least 3 of those things to give me strength. So this morning, you know, I woke up, I read some Joyce Meyers as my devotional. You know, I listened to some worship music. I read a couple of scriptures, because I know that my strength does not come from me, but it comes from the Lord. And so I wanted to make sure that I was just full of energy this morning to pour into this group here this morning. And so that's really important for me. And one of the things I also picked up is gardening, believe it or not. You know, my sister just bought a house recently. You know, I've been living, you know, in my duplex for, you know, many years. And so I travel a lot, so I'm never really at home. And I felt like now that I'm forced to be home, it's like, this is your environment, right? This is where you're spending your time. It has to be empowering. It has to be uplifting. It has to be encouraging. It has to feel good. And so, you know, I did some, you know, redecorating in the home. You know, I put in, you know, essential oils in different rooms. And then I also built a little patio garden. And so my sister and I, because she bought a home, we just started gardening in her house. But then I was just like, you know what, I want a little garden. And so I just went on Pinterest, and I, you know, found pictures of like little patio gardens. And so I'm growing, you know, cilantro and basil and parsley, some peppers. I have kale and lettuce, tomatoes, and I have flowers, of course. And so it is literally an oasis for me to get up in the morning before I even start work, and I have to go out on the patio in the sun and check on my flowers, water them. It's like nurturing, just like we nurture our students, we nurture everyone else. It's actually nurturing, and it's very therapeutic. And so those 2 things have really helped me. My, you know, power hour practice, and then my gardening has been really empowering for me. Yeah, and spending time with my family, of course, is always good. You know, laughter is great. Sometimes we can get so caught up that we isolate ourselves, and I feel like isolation can be very dangerous. And so we got to find time to, you know, spend with those that we love.
So we have one final question. We have one of our attendees is an entrepreneur, and she's in her first year of starting her nonprofit. And she said she just wants to know, what is one thing or a couple things she can do that you would recommend from your past experience in expanding her network to help her grow?
Absolutely. So you know what, this is the thing I think that's a myth for entrepreneurs with building a network. I actually have an ebook, and I would like to gift all of the attendees who registered my ebook. And so I will send that to Ms. Shelley, and she can email it to you all. It's 7 steps to growing your professional network, a guide for professionals in a challenging economy. Now, I wrote this 10 years ago, and we're right back here, right? Everything kind of repeats itself. So it's still very relevant to this day. It was edited by Black Enterprise, and it's full of great strategies. But one of the things that I, encourage entrepreneurs is start where you are. There is so many people who feel like they need to have every social media platform. They need to go to every networking event. They need to, try to be at every, thing to build their network. And the reality is, a lot of times you want to start where you are, because these are the people that know you. These are the people that can vouch for you. So I say, start with those that you work with. Look at people, at your church. Look at family members. You never know who knows who. When I started off as an entrepreneur, I didn't, have a network. All of my network was educators. And so I just started talking to, different colleagues on lunch or at meetings, and like, hey, do you know anybody that's an entrepreneur? Do you have any, connections to people that are in entrepreneurship? And everyone was like, oh yes, my cousin does this. I have this resource. I know about this person. And so that really helped me expound my network, people at church, just friends of mine. And so having to start where you are is so great, because it gives you that comfortability and that confidence, because these are people that that support and love you. But then also, these are people that can vouch for you and say, hey, I have this amazing person who is starting a business. I think she would be great for this opportunity. I think she would be great to invest in. Starting nonprofits is definitely, what I call a heart business. Right. And so you have to be really strategic about how you, get funding. So there are a lot of grants out right now because of COVID and, for small businesses. So if you go onto our blog at thebostonword.org, we actually have a list of grants that you can apply for currently to help you with your business. And then, fundraising, is really essential to your business. And then making sure that you get someone on your team who can write grants for you. A lot of times as entrepreneurs, we feel like we have to do everything, and you don't. You can actually enlist people on your team as consultants when you need things done, because the reality is we don't have money as entrepreneurs to build a team. You can't have an accountant on payroll. You can't have your lawyer on payroll. And so just enlisting a network of people that when you need them, they're available, right? So a grant writer, an attorney, a trademarks person, an accountant, whatever it is that you need, a business strategist, having those people on speed dial is really important to grow your network.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Kamika, for joining us today. It was a pleasure. I think we all got nuggets of wisdom that we can take back as we look at how do we really unleash our purpose and potential, and love the power hour. I need to do more of that myself. So thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Shelley. I appreciate it. And just congratulations to you all. And just keep empowering our young people. It's literally, I think, probably one of the most rewarding jobs that you can have. And so I just, want to continue to just encourage everyone to continue the work that they're doing, especially during these challenging times. And if you all need me, you know where to find me.
Great. We're going to go ahead now, and we're going to take a short break. And during our break, we have a great pleasure to have an award-winning songwriter and actress from Zimbabwe, Selves, join us. She has released 6 albums, has been nominated for many awards around the world, and won the Hottest Song of the Year in Africa Entertainment Award for her hit. So I'd like to turn it over to her. We are so happy to have you with us today, and we will all regroup in 5 minutes. So we'll regroup at 10:49. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. The song that I'm going to play for you is a song that talks about some of the abuse that the girl children face here in Africa, where they're not taken to school simply because they're girls. So this one is talking about a girl who's married off at a very young age, and she's forced to move into marriage and start raising children when she's a child herself. It's called Shungu, and it's available on iTunes. From my very first album. Hope you enjoy. mumoyo mangu, shungu dziri mumoyo mangu, shungu dziri mumoyo mangu, ndizorore ndadzitaura, shungu dziri mumoyo mangu, ndizorore ndadzidura, shungu dziri mumoyo mangu. Fuma yacho vakadya kare kare, kundiro dzangu nezita, zita ziguruguru rine ziduku, zvanzi murume watakuwanira mwana, ane mari yanono kuchengeta, ndiye murume watakuwanira mwana, kuchengeta iwe netsinza redu rose, shungu dziri mumoyo mangu, shungu dziri mumoyo mangu, shungu dziri mumoyo mangu, shungu dziri mumoyo mangu, ndinoenda kutaura, shungu dziri mumoyo mangu, ndinoenda kutaura, shungu dziri mumoyo mangu.
That was absolutely amazing. I know that brightened up my day. Thank you so much for being a part of our Girls Education Conference today. We're going to give it one more minute, and then we're going to get started with our panel. Great. Well, welcome back, everybody. Thanks again for that beautiful music. I just asked all of our panelists if you want to go ahead and make sure that you open up your camera and your mics, and we have a great group of panelists here today. I'm very excited. I think you will be very impressed with these women and their huge accomplishments and really their unique perspective on girls' education. So I'd like to start, and when I say your name, if you just want to wave so everybody knows who you are, I would like to start with introducing Esther Benjamin. Hello. Esther is the CEO and Executive Director of World Education Services. She has been a global executive both in the public, the private, and the civic sectors for over 25 years, and she's led programs in more than 100 countries. World Education Services, Inc. is a global social enterprise that evaluates and advocates for the recognition of international education qualifications. She has, among many of her achievements, Esther had previously worked for Laureate Education, Inc., which is a global leader in providing access to high quality, innovative institutions of higher education. She also served in President Obama's administration, where she was Associate Director of Global Operations for the Peace Corps, no small job there, and was appointed as a White House Fellow under President Bill Clinton. Welcome, Esther.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to join.
And our next panelist is Jill Eid. Jill is the Executive Director of Girls on the Run Chicago. It's a nonprofit after-school program that inspires girls to be joyful, healthy, and confident using a fun, experience-based curriculum which creatively integrates running. Under Jill's leadership, the Chicago chapter has served more than 10,000 girls this year with their life-changing program. Prior to Girls on the Run, Jill served as Associate Director of Growth and Strategy at Cradle to Cran, where she played a key role in developing the organizational national governance and social and shared service models. She also helped the organization with its first expansion into a new market. Welcome, Jill. Our next panelist is Carla Walker. She is the president of Think Big Strategies. In 2010, Carla founded Think Big Strategies as a strategic communication and planning group to work with leaders of nonprofit, government, and business to drive dramatic change in their community. For 5 years, she also served as a strategic advisor to the founder of the African Community Fund for Education Group. Prior to launching Think Big Strategies, she spent nearly 2 decades spearheading large civic engagement and public service initiative at the local, state, national, and international levels. She has also had leadership positions in 3 U.S. presidential campaigns. Welcome, Carla. And our final panelist is Victoria Watkins. She is the Chief of Staff and to the Chairman and Co-CEO of Ariel Investments. She also is the co-founder of Project Style. Project Style is a nonprofit organization which provides workshops to young women on confidence and self-worth. She's also an attorney here in Chicago, and prior to joining Ariel, she worked with the city of Chicago in the office of Mayor Ron Emanuel, where she served as a senior advisor and deputy director. So welcome, Victoria. We're glad to have all of you here today. And I know I'm very excited to begin our discussion. And I'll ask each of you some questions, but we'll have a really informal format here. So if you have something you want to add after somebody else speaks, feel free just to jump right in. So my first question is going to be for you, Victoria. And we know really how important representation and role models are. And we know that when young girls see themselves in those role models, they often have greater motivation to really get to where they want to go. Who were some of your role models in your life that really helped you to get where you are today?
Well, first I want to thank you all for having me. I'm really so excited about taking part in this panel and the education conference in general. But I would definitely say that my role models growing up started off with my mother, my two grandmothers and one of my great-grandmothers. My great-grandmother, who I'm named after, she retired when I was 6 months old to take care of me. And I always say that those were my original girlfriends, my grandmother, my two grandmothers and my great-grandmother. And I spent a lot of time with them. And as I look back now and remember my Nana taking me to ballet class on some Saturdays, and then we would go to McDonald's for brunch after class. And so I am, 3-4 years old having brunch with my Nana, and I would have tea with my great grandmother. And the things that I realized they were instilling in me then are so critical to me and the way I am professionally and personally now. I feel like I did learn a lot about friendship through the three of them, and definitely through my mom. A lot of the things that I do as a friend and, as a godmother and just kind of those core woman things, I know that I picked up from them. And so they were my original role models for sure, because I can think of things as a very little girl that I was picking up and experiencing, and it all came from them. So they were the originals for sure.
Great. My next question is for Carla. And one of the things, Carla, that you talk about is people having a hive. And it sounded like Victoria's grandma and mom were her hive. But you talk about how important this is for young girls. And can you tell us exactly what you mean, Carla, when you say hive, and how does one go about finding their hive? Carla, I think you're still on mute.
Okay, great. So a hive, to me, the way that I use that term is similar to what has been around for, ages, right? These would be, some people might call it your crew, your besties, your squad, your council, your kitchen table, right? I like to also call my team and my hive my sanity touchstones. Kamika was talking an awful lot about kind of self-care and mental health. And so my sanity touchstones are very helpful in terms of kind of just listening to me, allowing me the space to vent and be frustrated. But they are also very powerful and dynamic women in their own rights. And so the hive is this, and so for some of the younger folks, right, and Beyonce fans out there, you've got the beehive, right? And so it's a kind of take on that, right? It's more about a group of women who can be very supportive, who can keep you focused, who can listen to you, who can be there for you in good times and in not so good times, who can kind of help you get through situations. Now, to be clear, these are not yes women. These are not just going to go along with everything you say and never challenge you. That, I think, is the importance of having a hive. These are your friends who can tell you that's not the right thing to do, right? And I think that's very, very critical, especially with what young people are dealing with and the pressure they are experiencing in these uncertain times, right? That's not only for young women, that's for all women. You find these friends of yours in, any situation that you might be dealing with that is there for you, right? My best friend, when I have several of them, but my oldest best friend, I met her the first day I walked into my kindergarten class, and we are still tight. I am the godmother to her child. I speak with her sometimes on a regular basis, but sometimes there might be 4 or 5 months where both of us are just extremely busy with life and we haven't connected. But when we do get together, it's almost as if no time has passed. right? So you find these folks, and you can invite people into your circle and into your squad and into your hive. And I think that's really, really helpful in terms of kind of building that confidence with young women, right? Knowing that there is someone else out there who has your back, even if you're 7 or 8 or 17 and 18 or 27 years old, or in my case, 53 years old. You just know that you have a group of girlfriends who can help you kind of get through life. My hive and my squad now under coronavirus, we've been meeting every Thursday evening at 5:30 on Zoom and Google Hangouts. And we have, we talk about everything from, does anybody want to, how are you doing your hair this week, to the latest issues about what's happening with the protests and who's involved with that and what's going on in our various disciplines. And so that's kind of what I mean by hive. And I think we all have that. I don't know if that's how we all define that those group of special women friends in our network to kind of help us get through life and get through work.
I love it. I do now, hearing that definition, have my own hive that I met in college, and they are definitely, as you said, the women who are my sanity stones, and they're also the women that tell me what I need to hear, not always what I want to hear. So I think we can all benefit from really having that strong hive of women. So thanks for sharing that perspective, Carla. So Jill, I'd love to hear your perspective. For the past couple years, we've really seen young people step into leadership roles across the country. I think we're seeing it now happen. How does Girls on the Run support empowering really this next generation of leaders?
Yeah, I think that for us, when we think about our girls, we teach them about their whole selves, right? So we as individuals don't show up to school or our life with just our math and our science. We're showing up as our whole full selves. And so we talk really intentionally about their body, about their mind, about their spirit, about their heart, and about their relationships. And so when we think about things like social emotional learning, really looking to help girls develop healthy relationships. How do you actually manage those emotions? How do you make intentional decisions? How do you set and reach goals? And when I think about the foundational skills we all need as leaders, that's right there. That's the core of that. On top of that, our girls experience additional layer of silence and silencing. And so our programs are really designed to help empower them to understand, identify, and lift up their own voices. And Shelley, as you had mentioned, we're seeing girls show up as leaders right now, right? They are taking the charge on Black Lives Matter. They are taking the charge on climate change. And so I'm inspired and continue to be inspired by our young people and their role in leadership.
I love that about raising up their own voice. And one thing that I'm always in awe of the younger generation is how easily they've stepped into their own voice. I know when I think back to who I was, I wish I could turn back the clock, and I wish I could have that level of confidence and have found my voice earlier in my own personal journey. So the work that you guys do to unleash that is just amazing. So thanks for that. So Esther, I'd like to ask you, as we all on our journey, we've gone our personal journeys, we have people who have really inspired us, that we can look back and say, that was a person that helped lead us to where we're at. Who was that person or people in your journey that have really inspired you?
Thanks for that question. One of the blessings of an international career is coming across just great people around the world. So I've been blessed to cross paths with extraordinary individuals around the world. And many of my fellow panelists spoke about the women and their families and the women in their circles and girls education conference here. I think about also my grandfather, and I was born in a small third world village in the country of Sri Lanka, and my grandfather, born in 1895, believed in the power of girls' education. And I think that was sort of passed to me as inspiration. And as I think about the people who've inspired me, many names come to mind, but I think it's a set of qualities that really comes to mind. And the quality
I think, I think she's froze up.
That most inspires me when I'm back. No?
Yep, you're back.
Okay. The quality that I look most for in an individual who inspires me is the ability of an individual to really hone in on their unique gift to the world. What is that unique gift and contribution that I am meant to make to the world? And then having the judgment and the ability to marry that with and to find the intersection of your unique contribution and gift to what is needed in the world. So that's how you get at your vocation, right? And so the people to me that sort of bring me to life and they're fully alive in the world are those people who can really discover early in their lives that gift that is unique to them, that the world needs, and that they manifest through their leadership. Earlier this year, in my last international trip before COVID, I was in India and had a chance to spend time with Kailash Satyarthi, who was one of the 2 Nobel Peace Prize winners in 2014. Talk about someone who today, at the age of 66, has helped to remove tens of thousands of people from child labor and to transition these young people into education. Many of them were girls who were involved in child labor in India and beyond, and he was recognized with the Peace Prize. And then I'm deeply motivated with his co-prize winner, Malala, who is now a household name, and Kailash is 66. Malala is 22 and the most recent Oxford graduate. These are 2 individuals that are a gift to the world at 2 very different ages, but they've discovered their power, their gift, and they're making that contribution to the world in such a transformative way. So I highlight that quality, and I highlight 2 individuals that inspire me among many others who've motivated me.
I love your point. So much of what you said, but I love the point about the unique gifts that everybody has and how we unleash that. And one of the things that Dory always says when we take a role on is that we're uniquely doing whatever that role is in the organization with our own gifts. And no 2 people do, even if you have the same title or you do the same job, you don't do it alike. So I think that really speaks to how we put our own stamp on the work that we do. And that so I think so often there's a real bias to have everybody conform, or you want to be like somebody, especially when you're young in a career. And really it's that uniqueness and that authenticity that really speaks and sets you apart. So I love that. I love that. And I love that your grandfather, not unlike Stanley, was an early supporter of girls' education. So he was early feminist in the family. So I love that story. Victoria, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about confidence. You know, we've all, talked about how important that is and self-worth. And what in your experience, what are the main things that we can do to gain our own self-confidence and find our own voice and help those young people that we work with to really gain their confidence and self-worth?
I think your point about authenticity is right on, because so often our world will give us 2 messages. It will tell us, be yourself and be who you are, but then also expects us to conform and be like everyone else. And I think there's definitely comfort in being like everyone else to some degree, but we all strike an other box in some sort of way, or many other boxes, and are outside of kind of general common circles. And so what I think is really important is remembering that people are different and seeing their differences. Of course, in the last few weeks, we hear a lot of, I don't see color, I don't see, gender, or, which is an even harder one, but, or whatever. I don't see whatever it is that makes you an other. And I think we do need to see those things because they're so important for us to embrace and enjoy about each other. And so even whether it is for, the young girls that we work with, all the way up to, people my age and beyond, boys, everyone, I think we need to encourage each other and know the importance of everyone's individual uniqueness and authenticity. And I think the more that becomes a conversation, you will then get to the commonalities because, and actually Michelle Obama said this in her book and, around on her book tour, it's harder to hate up close. And so when you can break down the differences, which are most often aesthetic, and get closer to someone and learn about like, hey, oh, I didn't know you were from this neighborhood. Or maybe, generations ago, your grandparents were from that neighborhood and I live here now. We can communicate that way and we can break down the barriers that stand between us. But I think it's important to see them and recognize them first, because even in finding the commonalities, you can still learn from what's different, and that brings us together anyway. And like I said, I think that's on so many fronts, whether it's personally, academically, certainly professionally as well.
I love that quote from her book as well, and I really do believe that I think the world would be in a better place if we all had the opportunity to really get to know each other before we tried to share our opinions, our thoughts. Mm-hmm. If we really just got to know each other on a human level, there's so much great character that we all bring to the table that, I love being a study of people and having a rich hive that have that diversity in there. So thanks for sharing that. I'd like Jill for you to talk a little bit, and we hit a little bit on it when you talk about the pressure and the conflicting messages that especially girls get. And what we also know is that, because of some of that pressure to conform, that sometimes girls, especially adolescent girls, really see a hit in their confidence, and sometimes it can drop, twice as much as we see happen with their male counterparts. What role does the social and emotional learning play in this to really help take an active role in combating that negative trend that we're seeing?
Yeah. So I think I want to even go back to what Victoria was sharing around embracing. One of our values as an organization is that we embrace our differences and find strength in our connectedness. And so we have a lesson where our girls essentially caucus on things that make them different or similar. And the beginning of the lesson, it's perceived as like a competition, right? Like there's no ground rules set. Girls start racing against each other, and then slowly they start realizing that they're just finding out what is different and what is similar. And we start with things that are pretty, benign, things, their favorite color, their favorite food. And then we dig deeper and deeper into things around preference. Do they prefer to be alone or with others? What languages do they speak? How do they identify? And so I think it helps our girls understand, for me, confidence is also closely linked to what Esther was saying around embracing what makes us unique. And I think by demonstrating that those unique factors, but also what brings us together is really important. As you mentioned, Shelley, girls are most confident when they're the age of 8. And so what we're trying to do is really harness that confidence throughout their adolescence. And so by building in social emotional, so that learning capabilities, so those are things like confidence, but also skills like caring, connection to others, competence, contribution, and character. And what we're seeing is that attention to social emotional learning early on can really act as a protective factor against other negative life experiences throughout life for our girls and for others. I think the other layer to this too is the role that non-competitive physical activity can play and help building girls' confidence. So girls at an early age start to see themselves as less competent in terms of physical activity. And so by really engaging them in this non-competitive physical activity space, it creates the space for social emotional learning skills to build and to develop. and also for them to demonstrate themselves that they can find joy and succeed in physical activity. And I think this, for me, sets them up, and we see this setting them up for long time confidence.
I love that. It's sad though that they start losing their confidence as they're most confident at 8 years of age. You know, that's you know, we really need to think about how we continue to support that and those protective factors that keep that confidence intact. I am often in awe of my daughter Elodie, who's 23. She's got more confidence, and I wish I had that. I could be so much more in conquering the world, and you know, I find myself honestly at times as a mom having to make sure and be really cautious that I don't squelch that, and that I really foster it, because you know, obviously as a mom and as a woman leader, I want that to continue to cultivate. But at times I feel sometimes even we do things unintentionally that can negatively impact that.
And I think too, there's this layer, the way that we operate our program is it's all volunteer coaches. And what we hear oftentimes from our coaches is that these lessons are things that they wish that they were taught when they were younger. And that by coaching the program, they actually are also building their own confidence and their own social emotional learning capabilities. So it's this virtuous cycle that while we're investing in our girls, we're also seeing it show up in building confidence for women too.
We have that same result with Project Style, where some of our volunteers don't necessarily have, I guess, the confidence that they think they do or that they should. And when the girls are so amazed by what they do for work, or just by them in general, oh my God, I love your outfit. It's just, you know, you look so great, or that's so cool, you went on this trip, whatever it is that the coaches are sharing, that our confidence builders are sharing with them, that's so amazing to them. So they leave our sessions and they're like, oh my God, I feel better. You know, the girls made me feel better because they saw them in such a high light. So it does work both ways, to Jill's point.
Yeah, that's so true. It's got you know, it's a drip that goes in the pond that just keeps spreading, you know, when we all do that. And I think so often times as women, you know, we tear each other down instead of building that up, and we need to do more of really supporting one another and what we do going forward. So thanks for that perspective. Carla, I absolutely love the name of your company, Think Big Strategies. Can you share with us a little bit behind the name and really what inspiration was behind there, and what can the attendees today take from that? Carla, we can't hear you.
Me? Is that better?
Yes.
There we go. Okay. Think Big Strategies comes from it's a shared mantra between my sister and I. And that mantra is think big, follow through, deliver results. And that's really how we look at attacking problems and addressing issues in life, just in general, like just in work, with work we do in our careers. She is a singer-songwriter, and I'm a strategist with a career in politics and working as a civil servant. And that came about when I decided to step down from my role as the chief of staff to the former mayor in Cincinnati and start this new consultancy. I asked my brother and my sister what I should name the company, and they said, you should name it after the way that you approach life. And that was what we decided, Think Big Strategies. And so the way in which I work with game changers, and game changers to me are these dynamic, super charged individuals who have an understanding of what their passion is and what they want to accomplish, what that problem is that they want to solve. But they're also working on what I call game-changing initiative, right? These dynamic changes that they want to make with either their company. Primarily, I work with a lot of nonprofits and a lot of government agencies at the local level, at the state level. And they are looking to make that dynamic change in their community. And so as a strategist, I really am thinking about what are the ways in which I can break down these silos of communication, and the way that the way that initiatives kind of land with the individuals or the communities that they are impacting and affecting. And so that's how I go about my work. But it's really about the mantra in the back of my mind always: think big, follow through, deliver results. And a lot of people, I think it was Kamika who was talking about, dreaming big. I think sometimes people are afraid to do that. It's not something that's not within them. I just feel like they might think that's just an enormous problem to try and tackle, and so they kind of step back from it. And I encourage people to step into it, lean into it, because that's honestly what I feel we need right about now. We're dealing with the world is dealing with some major issues, right? You've got the global pandemic happening, and then of course here in the U.S., and this isn't something that is not seen across different borders. Here in the U.S., we have the other pandemic of all of this racial strife and trying to deal with kind of dismantling systemic racism and what that might look like, what that might mean. That's not just happening here in the U.S., and that's happening in other countries. And young people are at the forefront of this, and it's really exciting for me to see young women, as you mentioned earlier, finding their voice to really speak on these issues. It's quite empowering. It's empowering for me to see that happen. I'm hoping that a lot of other folks can take a lesson from that. And if it's from an 8-year-old, Jill, I'm excited and happy to do that.
They're here for it. They're here for it.
I love your 3, think big, follow through, achieve results. I absolutely love that. That's going to be my new mantra. I'm going to steal it from you. It's great.
No problem.
And, one of the things too, when you talk about game changers, that's what really drove me to make the transition I made 5 years ago to come to the YWCA, because, talk about not a small problem to try to crack is empowering women and eliminate racism. And, we talk about this time that we're in, and somebody said when we were talking internally, it's like having the Spanish flu, the civil rights movement, and the Great Depression collide all at once. And so it really does take those game changers to be able to tackle where we're at in our history today. So thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
Esther, I'd like for you to share a little bit about, as we think about, you've had so much experience, not only here in the U.S., but across the world. Where do you really see the vision for girls' education? Where do you see it going, and what will it take to really get there?
I'll do my best to answer this question briefly, because there are entire books and conferences devoted to that topic. As you all know, there are about 132 million girls who are out of school, and over 30 million are out of school at the primary school level, and over 100 million at the secondary school level. By the time they get to university, they're often well represented in the classroom, but the number of girls who are out of school at the primary and secondary levels is not changing. And I've been following these numbers over decades now, and the improvements aren't happening. So I was thinking about, my vision for girls' education, which I think is pretty consistent with most experts who spend a lot more time than me even on this topic. My focus is on running educational organizations, but the vision is really to have increasing numbers of girls in schools and having access to schools. And they should have access to schools with the appropriate infrastructure, with quality education that is relevant, that they are taught by qualified teachers, and that their schools are well run by qualified administrators. And they shouldn't just have access to school and be in the classroom. They should be learning and achieving outstanding academic outcomes at school and in their classrooms. In addition to the academics, they should be building their self-confidence and acquiring life skills and leadership skills. And it doesn't stop there. There needs to be effective ways for them to transition from school to work and to have access to 21st century jobs of the future. In addition to all this, they need to be able to tackle the challenges of society that women are disproportionately hurt by when you look at situations around the world, whether it's poverty or gender-based violence or child labor or nutrition, the whole gamut of issues. So once they have transitioned, hopefully effectively to work, they should be healthy and engaged in society and productive in their places of employment or entrepreneurship, and earning, hopefully without hopefully earning in similar ways to their male counterparts, and able to support themselves and their families. So I mean, those are the pieces. And as I've visited schools and visited universities and run universities, this is the kind of vision with which I've tried to lead. So it's pretty comprehensive, and we're not making progress. And I firmly believe that it comes down to political will. I think it comes down to the investments and executing on effective plans, country by country, and school by school and community by community around the world.
Thank you for sharing that. And I totally agree with you. We're not making nearly enough progress. Having been somebody who's been in the education, early education field for, 30 plus years now, that is a field, while I've seen progress, I still haven't seen the level of progress I'd like to see in there. And when you talk about how important it is to make sure we have that competent administrator, and in really the role that they play is so much more than just educator, as you talk about. Yeah. I mean, it's just a very complex role. And one of the things that we're really looking at in our support at the YWCA with, we're focused particularly on the early childhood community about how do we make sure we set educators up for success going back now after what we've been through. Because it's not the same world they left when they left their classrooms and ended the year abruptly and converted to digital learning. It's a different world. And how do we make sure they're in a good place to do the leadership they need to do going forward?
Yeah, I mean, we speak and probably give lip service to continuous learning, right? And I kind of realized 2.5 decades into my career that my last graduate degree had been in 1995, and it was 2018, and I hadn't been back in the classroom. Sure, I was learning on the job and taking on pretty challenging roles every 5 to 6 years, but I actually went back to an executive education program, and it reminded me the importance of continuous learning. And we're all here years and decades into our careers. And I think it's important, whether you're a school administrator, a CEO, or whatever role it is that you have, that you go back to school. Continuous learning.
Oh, I think we froze up again. I couldn't agree more, though, with Esther's point about continuous learning.
Includes those working in education.
I think you're fading in and out.
Yeah, no, I think point made. It's continuous learning is for all of us, including those in the education field. And I challenge myself every year now about what it is that I'm going to learn and put myself in the classroom or online to gain additional skills and knowledge.
I think that theme of continuous learning, we've heard you talk about it's important. We've heard Jamie talk about it in his remarks. I mean, I think, you know, it's a passion. I once had a mentor, and he unfortunately was a mentor that I learned more about what I wasn't going to do with, but he did leave me with a nugget of advice. And he said, don't ever stop learning. And he said, once you think you've arrived, you've already started losing ground.
Right.
And I tend to remind myself of that continuously, because I think, you know, the world's changing at such a record pace that what you know to be true and best practices today can look very different. And even, you know, 6 months from now when we go and when we move ahead. So I would like to, go ahead, Carla.
I was just going to say, it's quite interesting, this continuous learning. I was just speaking with my cousin about this, that because of COVID and this transition now of everything digital and everything happening on Zoom or Google Hangouts or Skype, there is an opportunity to find out so much more about other issues, other disciplines. You know, there used to be this conference, and as an example, we were supposed to be in Chicago face to face, right? But because it's digital, yes, we have an audience that's primarily Illinois, but as I shared the fact that I was going to be participating in this conference, that went out to my network, which is in Ohio and across the country. So there's an opportunity, I think, now for folks to really begin kind of identifying new places and new areas where they can learn. There are webinars going on all the time. And so if you can identify what your passion is, and this is not just for adults, but, you know, young kids are doing, you know, are getting together online and learning about different things. And I just think it's a fascinating way of adding to how you can kind of increase your knowledge about a particular subject area nowadays.
Definitely. So I would just, before we're going to give people in the audience a chance, if they have questions, if you want to send the Q&A. But while they're doing that, I would just like to throw it out to the group to any closing remarks and that you have for the group. And if you want to really talk about as well, recommendations you have for people getting involved and really being active behind this about empowering women and girls' education would be great to hear from your perspectives.
I think Esther's point about her grandfather, which actually also made me think about my dad, is a good point as far as this is something that guys can get in on too, because we all need encouragement from everywhere. And I think that guys getting in on empowering women, especially because of the power that they have in our society, is just as important to us doing our part. And it goes along with all of the other battles that we're fighting. You know, whichever other is fighting a battle, the others need to help them in fighting that battle. So guys can get in on this too. Now, does that mean that they will be in, confidence circles or anything like that? Well, maybe not, but they can still be advocates in very impactful ways. And that definitely makes a difference.
Thank you.
I would
could not agree more than that with that, Victoria. I'm so sorry.
No, go ahead, Carla.
They can be incredibly strong allies in this battle to empower our women and girls. I know when I was in the mayor's office and we started doing a lot of mentorship programming, there was a lot of conversation about, can guys mentor girls? Can girls mentor guys? And I said, I don't see that there's clearly going to be a difference, but there's a value in both. Absolutely a value in both. I'm sorry, Esther.
No. many of us are running organizations, so we're looking at the problems and solutions that we work on from a systemic level, from a programmatic level, from an operational level. And something that I'm continuing to remind myself is the importance of that mentoring of individuals. Our children become our legacy often and carry on some of the work we begin, but many of our younger colleagues and peers, many of my younger colleagues are just blossoming into phenomenal leaders. So I am being very intentional about almost the percent of time that I carve out of my day, out of my week, out of my month to mentoring and supporting individuals that are collaborators on the issue of education and girls' empowerment and girls' education, and also my students themselves. But carving out that time for mentoring, motivating, supporting, and championing individuals is something that could not be more powerful, in addition to the work that we do at the systemic and programmatic and policy level. So I'll leave that thought.
I love that you actually are intentional about carving out time to do that. I think it's so important. We get so busy, and I've heard people say, I don't have time for that. But what I've really, a best practice that I've really learned watching the leaders here at the Y is to do that. And I have to tell you very selfishly, I've learned more in those exchanges than I feel sometimes I give. And it keeps me fresh and on my toes. So I get as much and most of the time told from what I give.
I think I'd echo what Victoria, Carla, and Esther have all shared. The other thing that I'd say is that I heard this somewhere and think it's so valuable is that girls today are going to be women tomorrow. And that transition and the success of that transition is all of our responsibility. And so frankly, if we're not investing in our girls, I think particularly our girls of color, we are not investing in the future of our community. And when I think about investing, I think about your focus, your time, your programs, but also the dollars. If we look at our budgets, show us a budget and we'll show you what people care about. And so putting dollars behind and putting money behind our girls' education and their success. So I think that can be $1 or $1 million, whatever it needs to be, but just showing up with the resources our girls need and they deserve to be successful.
Wonderful. We do have a question that has come across, and anybody who wants to, any and all who want to answer it, feel free to jump in. But it was, how do we influence governments and society to enable more inclusion of women and girls? Oh, anyone want to take it?
I feel like I'm putting my lobbyist hat back on. It's like Carla, I'm in his office too. And I think there are ways to do it within the law, although I guess we would think that we should have all of that covered by now. But I think for the government to be able to invest in programs that are doing the work already, as well as prioritizing those programs, whether it's in their budget or in their their own program offerings through social services, through the park districts, the libraries, the school districts. There's a lot of tentacles that they can kind of easily do it. And then also I would say thinking further and like how can we solve this problem in a new way? Maybe is there some way to bring in the fire department? Well, we never thought about that, but maybe there is. And so let's think of something that doesn't seem to make sense and maybe try to force it to make sense, or just give it a try and see if it works. So I think government has a lot of different options that are both within the law, whether it's, state statutes or local ordinances, but also in just seeing what fits in something that could be done in shorter order than changing the law of the land.
Thanks, Victoria.
I often think about this in terms of being very succinct about what the problems are. And for each of the challenges we see, what are the appropriate policies that need to be in place? What is the leadership that needs to be in place? The investments that need to be made. And in the case of education, it's investment, it's often investment per student. And clearly, you know, there's not an equal investment per student across our country by any means. And then we have to hold our communities, cities, and country accountable for the results that are or not being achieved. So I kind of look at it from the perspective of, you know, problem, policy, leadership, investment, and accountability for results. And it is an ongoing focus, and we can never let up.
Yeah, I would second that. And just to add to what both Victoria and Esther have said, I look at it also from the perspective of developing the pipeline of leaders, right? When you look at especially city budgets at the local level, those are moral documents. So as Jill said, if you want to know what a city is really interested in and what are their priorities, you look at how they are investing their dollars. But in terms of developing that pipeline, there are things that can be done outside of the budget. For example, one of the young women who was an elected official here in Cincinnati has created Girls in Government Day. So between the ages, well, starting as early as 8 years old, you can register for participating in this day-long program to find out about the roles of government. And the entire panel, for the most part, are women, but you are in City Hall, you are either on a track of what can I do with what where I'm currently involved to develop my interest in being an elected official, and another track on what can I do to develop my interest in being a part of the community-based leadership that works on these issues. And it's an opportunity to really showcase women who are doing this work so that young women can actually see themselves in this work. But it's also an educational opportunity to talk about how government can change and begin to pivot so that young women and girls are not only involved in the development of policy, but behind the scenes and in front of the cameras on what's happening with their cities and local governments.
The only thing I'd add is the making of the case, right? The message of the why, which is that there's a real financial implication to all of us and to our communities and companies when we don't have female leaders at the table. And so we see, when we look at the countries that are managing through COVID-19 the most successfully, they're oftentimes led by women. And so I think really recognizing the case for why, which is that women have to be there because we're oftentimes really, really quite strong leaders, right? And stronger leaders, so.
I love it. The case is clear.
That's just a message.
It's $1 and cents. It's good for business. It's good for government. And I think, you know, the part about being succinct and having that message ready, I think that's one of the things we all can do, because I was very humbled by that. I'm taking part of a advocacy and policy fellowship, and we had to get our pitch down to 2 minutes. So I learned the hard way that you could have the greatest plan, but to try to get it compelling in 2 minutes was often a challenge. It took me a couple takes of refining my message, but I think that those are great advice for all of us to really think about how we can within our circles make that change. So I just want a very heartfelt thank you to all of you, Victoria, Esther, Carla, and Jill. I can't think of a more empowering and energizing way for me to spend my morning, but I thank you for being a part of this panel discussion and being, at least just for this morning, a part of my hive for today. So thank you for that you do and for sharing those insights with us. So thanks a lot. And now I would like to introduce you to Madeline. Madeline is an international visual artist, speaker, and poet. She believes that in every adversity, there is a gifted champion and a game changer, rising with strength and resilience, ready to change the world and leave a lasting impact. She is now joining us today, and she will read her poem, A Sound More Than Words. Thank you, Madeline.
Thank you. And thank you, all the participants, all the ladies, and everyone that is behind the scenes and commenting. I just want to send my love to all of you. The poem that I'm going to do is called A Sound More Than Words. Feel the vibration and hear the sound far and wide. A surging awakening of the mind. Her soul is soaring high and free. She is wired with instincts that ignite the core of humanity. The circle of life collides with the cycle of wisdom. Through her voice, freedom rings louder and louder and louder. Her influence is the essence of her existence. That's the phenomenal woman in our daughters. Put education in their hands and they will show you that they are world changers. Our girls are not just a statistic. Our girls are a sound more than words. Our girls are game changers, breaking barriers. Yes, they are challenging the status quo and they are taking back their rights, rising to their place of value, refined and sparkling like diamonds. Our girls are a sound more than words. Though the stakes are high, they know that their seat is at the peak of self-actualization. Our girls are unleashing their potential in every sector. Our girls are a sound more than words. Their potence break their chains. It burns their chains. It melts away the brutality of violence and it turns back the clock. Their feet are swift. The heartbeat in their hearts rectify culture norms and practices. Yes, our girls are sexy and sassy, but don't let that fool you. Our girls dazzle the world with wisdom. Listen, just listen to their smashing voices, nullifying the thunderstorms of poverty, ignorance, and fragility. Listen again to their voices, releasing wisdom, power, and possibility. Our girls are a sound more than words. girls can never be silenced again. Listen to the frequency of their voices. It resounds, and it is an ever-growing ripple of progress, layer after layer of progress. Our girls are a sound more than words. And this is our cause today. Education is an equalizer. Education changes the narrative. And I know education is an equalizer because education changed my story. And I know education changed the stories of the women that you have seen speaking here today. Let's educate our girls. Education nurtures their voices. Let's educate our girls. Let them be independent and be a true expression of beauty. Let's educate our girls. They are ready to change the world. They are ready to lead. Our girls are a sound more than words. You and I can invest in the education of our girls. Our girls are an inexhaustible treasure. They are a sound more than words, and their voices must never be silenced again. Let's educate our girls, because we are a sound more than words. Thank you.